Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I've got a really fascinating guest. Her name is Gayle Lynn. She's a relationship coach, and we're going to be talking about non-traditional relationships today. And I always find this quite a fascinating subject. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Gayle.
Thank you for having me, Lyn.
You're very welcome. So tell the audience, before we get stuck into the heart of the meat of the subject, how you've come to be doing what you're doing now and educating and working with people around non-traditional relationships.
Well, I came by it because it was basically my hero's journey. It is a path that I ended up following with my previous partner. And, he came to me and wanted to have sex with somebody else. And he had never experienced that. We had been married for almost 28 years or something like that. And he came to me expressing his desires. And it kind of rocked my world a little bit because I was, that wasn't the way things happened. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I went through crying and emotions and basically crying in the closet because I wasn't sure, what's happening. Is my nest at risk? Am I not good enough? Am I, so all these emotions start flooding in. And, we worked through them. It took a lot of learning, a lot of different things that we did. And so just from all of the different things that we've done, from sacred sexuality to, communication classes to, more self-development, to get to where I'm like, we could navigate the waters. And so I was like, it came to a time in my life. I'm like, what would I really like to help people do? And it was really, I'd like to help them navigate these waters because it gets to be, some sticking points with jealousy and not really understanding how to communicate. So you end up going in what I call a communication circle where you talk over and over and over about the same thing and you're not getting anywhere. So, I just was like, what would I like to do with my coaching? And that's what I decided to do with it.
And did you say, is this a relationship you're still currently in, or did you say it was with an ex-partner?
I'm not currently in that relationship. We decided to split for different reasons. It wasn't because we opened our marriage. So no, right now I'm single and I am finding out a little bit more about me. And I think, being in the space of the non-traditional partnerships and having, a poly type relationship, it has shown me so much more about myself because with each person that I'm with, I actually get to see a different aspect of who I am and how I show up in the world. So I think it's been a very good experience.
So for those listeners listening to you talk about your relationship and what happened within that relationship, and it's to do with having, I suppose, with your partner's consent, having other partners involved in your relationship in an intimate way. Explain to the listeners what is that called, so that they understand there's a label for it.
Of course. So it's called an open relationship. And so basically that can also, you might hear terms of like ethical non-monogamy, and open relationships kind of become an umbrella, for different things where, some people in an open relationship, they'll say, you'll get some agreements going and you might say, okay, we're going to date other people and it's going to be, separate from each other. Then it could actually evolve into something like polyamory, where you have, it's not just like I might go see somebody and have sex with somebody and then come back to my nest and my primary partner and I'm good. There's no big emotional attachment. Whereas when you get into polyamory, it's, like polyamory. So it's two loves, or many loves, because poly. And so then, you might actually have a very close-knit relationship with more than one person. Or some people actually choose to do swinging, or the lifestyle, where they do it together as partners. And so we kind of played and experimented with all of them to see which one really worked for us. And so we were more open, where, he was seeing somebody else and I was seeing somebody else.
So playing devil's advocate, because I'm interested, but it's not something I'd want in my own personal life or relationship. Do you think maybe, because I've spoke to women that have been in this situation, and quite often it's the man that brings it up as a subject, and more often than not, to experiment outside of their relationship. And I'm just wondering, is it for some people some sort of protection mechanism to stop you getting too hurt in the future that they get involved in these sorts of relationships?
I would say that it does happen. It definitely does. And, that's why when I deal with a couple, I want to make sure, like, are both of you guys really on board? Like, let's really do some soul searching here and see if it's something both of you want or just one of you want, because then it can also be designed from there somewhat. It can be a mono, where you have a monogamous and then a polyamorous situation, and sometimes that works. And, sometimes people find out they're just different. They might be, one of them might be very polyamorous and the other one isn't. And so sometimes it comes a time when, they're not in relationship anymore. And it can be okay. That's okay. Everybody evolves and begins to discover new things about themselves. And then you got to make choices from there. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I suppose from, I suppose the health situation, how do you cope with coaching people through that, so that people keep themselves safe from unprotected sex, for example?
I have, this is one that I learned, and I love to teach this one too. Whenever somebody gets into these new situations, I always say that, BDSM, I know it sounds crazy, but B is for boundaries. So discussing your boundaries with somebody new that you're engaging with. Then your desires. What is your desires for this time, this moment? And then S is always sexual history. So always discussing it before it happens. That's the goal. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And then M is meaning. So if you follow those, 4 simple little things, what's the meaning you're going to take away from this? Does this mean we're going to be in a relationship forever? Does this, because that's the traditional thought. Oh, we've had sex. Now it's time to get serious and have a partnership and get married and, go up the relationship escalator, as it's so called. But yeah, so if you throw the S in there, right, then hopefully you're discussing that before you start playing. And I always encourage everybody to make sure, get tested frequently, depending on how many partners you have. And, whether it's 3 or 6 months or a year, whatever that is, so you can, definitely keep track of your sexual health. It's important.
Absolutely, it is important. And I suppose for me, it wouldn't necessarily be something I'd look for or would work for me, because I would be always wondering, would those other external partners have history that they'd be open about, and I suppose that's something we're never going to fully 100% know for sure, is it?
We aren't. And because you don't know, sometimes people are honest and some people aren't. And, it's just, you have to look at it for yourself. Everybody is different on how they feel about it. Some people are very, they're like not too concerned about it because they're like, oh, most of it's cured or you can manage it or whatever. And then there's other people who are like, no, I want to stay very clean. Well, that then becomes part of your choice. What are the risks you want to make? Because there are going to be some risks and you just have to be okay with it.
What's been your personal experience of your journey? Has it been that you've had external partners outside of your primary relationship that have just been one-offs, or have there been sort of regular partners that you've kept as sort of more of a smaller number?
I've kind of done both. Sometimes you think you're going to have more than a one-off, and then you're like, maybe not, maybe, so then it becomes a one-off. So best intentions going in don't mean they're always going to be that coming out. So, I've had some that, just have been, it felt like a hookup just because we never did, entertain, because we found out we didn't click. So why would we want to continue? That doesn't make sense.
No.
And then I have partners that I've had, very steady at times, so it depends. It's always a process.
And so currently, what's your current situation? Have you got multiple partners, boyfriends, sort of thing, in the inverted commas now, or what's the situation?
I do. I have 2 right now.
And do they know about each other?
Yes.
And are you exclusive to them, or do they have other partners too?
One doesn't, and by choice, and the other one does. Well, I do. He's a swinger, so it's more of a swinging type situation.
And what sort of, I suppose, if you're an audience member listening to this conversation now and you're curious and it's something that you would like to try, how do you actually, I suppose, step forward and find that person that might be a good match for experimentation with?
Well, there's different ways. There's apps, dating apps that you can get on and actually specify non-monogamy. And if you are in a current partnership, I always please put it in the description so people know what they're dealing with. That's the ethical non-monogamy part of it. It's the people who are doing it and like their wives don't know. So I always recommend, if you're going to go on a dating app or with anybody, really ask. And if they're like, oh yeah, my wife's okay with it. Well, if you're at a meetup group, let's say some kind of a polyamory meetup group, and you want to meet, or an open, or you go to a swingers club or something like that, always you have the right to say, well, can I talk to your wife about that? And see what they say. If the wife is really on board, she's going to be okay if you talk to her, which, actually can work out really good, because then you make a connection with her, and then you really do know you're in a good space or you're not in a good space, and then you can choose from there. So there are some dating apps, there's some meetup groups. For us, we went and did some sacred sexuality training, and so we met different people there that were kind of doing the same thing, had the non-traditional partnerships. So there's ways. It's one of those things, you make a choice, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden, the universe kind of starts rolling it out, and you start getting the opportunities running across your path. It's just like, I want to go buy a blue car. And all of a sudden you see blue car
Yes.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It functions the same way.
Absolutely. So for you, personally, how did you how did you cope with the initial impact of your husband saying he wanted to experiment in this arena?
I coped with it by crying. I did. I'm not going to lie, because it did. It started hitting all of my safety, all that childhood stuff, the abandonment, the safety, security, the not worthy. Those are all, I mean, if you want to hit all the core wounds, that's a good way to do it. um, but then it actually gave me an opportunity once, I moved through the emotion, because that's part of it. Part of learning how to deal with life is allowing yourself to move through the emotions and have them, not holding on to them. And so from there, we just began to have conversations, and we actually had a lot going on in our lives at that time. So what we did is we just kind of played with really ramping up the intimacy between the two of us, just to make sure we were really solid in where we were at. And then we went a whole year, and don't rush these things. If you really value the person you're with, you're not going to rush it. You're going to take your time, play with it, see if it's going to work for you. Take your time to work through the emotions, the jealousy that might come up, all of those things. And that's why I do what I do is with the coaching, is so that I can help people through those things. Because, we did a lot of different things. Well, now I have all that, and I bring it to one place, and I can help you, get through the emotions and understand, how to handle those feelings when they come up, and letting them go through, and when to communicate, and how to effectively communicate and reflect back, and make sure that everybody's heard, all of those things. So we took I bet it was probably over a year, probably 14 months before we actually said, at about 12, we said, okay, we're going to do this. And then it was probably 2 months later, then we actually started seeing somebody else. And I was actually the first one, of course.
Really?
His
Okay.
idea, I'm the first one, because I really did get on board, but he gave me the chance he didn't even know what it would look like. He just knew he had this desire, and he had never had sex with somebody else. Because we got married when we were 19, 21, we were in the church. That was a thing you didn't go sleeping around with a whole bunch of people. It was, you're supposed to get married, and that's it. And so, it took us time for us to figure out what it was. And now anymore these days, like, there's so much more information. You see it in the news, you see movie stars doing it. So it's becoming a more common thing. And I think a lot of people don't even realize how common it is.
Yeah, I do see it, like you say, a lot more, and it seems to be, more acceptable to partners these days, because people are, being more open and to talk about it, rather than just, go off and have an affair, so to speak. So it's interesting that you said that you ended up being the first one. How did that impact him then? With him being the one that suggested it, did it bring up all his feels and a lot of emotions for him to work through?
Oh yeah. Oh, it sure did. He definitely, it felt like a little bit of a sting, I think. I don't know. I can't say for sure. He'd have to say for himself. But it definitely did. And it's a new thing. Especially, it's different, like some people handle it by being swingers. So then you're going, with somebody to a club or meeting another couple, and you might do some kind of, soft thing where it's just nothing big, or you're not having sex or something like that. You're just getting to know people, maybe kissing or something like that, but you're together. And so it's, some people feel more comfortable with that and other people don't. They're like, no, I don't want to see my wife with another man, you know? So it becomes a very personal decision of how you want to design your relationship. And it can be a little bit of both. I mean, I know couples who kind of do it both ways. And I know couples who are like, nope, not unless I'm in the room, so it's a personal choice.
And do you have children in the mix?
We did. We had 3 children. They were older, high school and college. And we did get to a point probably 6 months after we decided to start doing it, and we'd be going out on dates, but we're both dressed up and we take separate cars. Because we would do like date night, but date night was with somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, they're older kids. They're, junior, senior, high and college. And so we chose to tell them. And really, because we were so taught, monogamy, 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 you don't do that, don't, all that stuff. And when we found out, hey, there are actually different ways to be in relationship and have it work. So why would we hide this from somebody? Why, especially our kids? Why it would feel like a double standard to me that we're doing this, but this is the way it's supposed to be. That doesn't work for me anyways. And some people they don't want to tell their kids. They just don't feel like they're ready for it. And so it's up to their personal, judgment of what they want to do with their family.
Mm-hmm. And how did your children receive it? Did they all become accepting of it, or did you have any resistance?
They were actually pretty good. They were very quiet at first.
Yeah.
I think had a little shock factor. But they were just to the point where they're like, Mom and Dad, we want you guys to be happy. If it's making you guys happy, then do it.
And how long was it before, I suppose that relationship ended?
Let's see.
Thereafter,
It
so to
was
speak.
probably 4 years after. And we're still in business together. We're still really good friends together. It for him, it wasn't about the relationships. It's more like his career and trying to figure out what he really wants to do. And he thought he was going to be going down a certain path. And well, he's going down that path. And he just felt like he wasn't going to be around very much. And he wanted to just he's like, what would it be like if we were single again and experiencing life in a different way? I mean, we still have these other relationships. He has other lovers, and so we really sat down and decided to, yeah, let's do that. Let's just, go experience life in a different way. We've had wonderful, 33 plus years together, and we have raised kids and we've done businesses and all different kinds of things. But, we're learning, other people bring out different things in us. And so what would it be like just, allowing these other things to kind of unravel even more? So, yeah.
That's so interesting. So, do you personally feel for yourself that, maybe for you and your husband, because you did meet and marry quite young, and maybe you were each other's first love, so to speak, and maybe even each other's first sexual partner for some people, that it might be a case of now you're thinking, really, we didn't really experience a single life much before we actually got together and settled down?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I was his first and only sexual partner. Now I had in high school, been with some guys, and I actually met my partner in college, but he was in college young. Like he started it when he was 16. So I had just met him right after he had turned 17. And then we were married by the time he was 19 and I had just turned 21. So we didn't have that single life, neither one of us really, especially him, because he went from home into being married.
Yeah.
So I mean, I had a little bit. I had like a couple semesters of college, and so a little bit.
Interesting. So for you then, do you foresee this being your life going forward, where you still continue to have sort of more of a polyamorous type of life, or could you see yourself again just wanting to settle down with just that one person?
I do think there's probably going to be a time and space, or maybe different spaces, in my life where I decide, right now I don't want complicated. I don't want to manage more than multiple relationships, and kind of hunkering down. Yeah, I could see doing that again.
I do empathize with people that are probably struggling with this if they're not really on board with it and their partner wants to experiment. What's your advice to anybody that's maybe in that situation?
I would that's where I come in. That's where coaching really comes in to help, because it helps you to really get down to what you do want, or maybe you do want to experiment and play with it, but you want somebody there to kind of help hold your hand. It's really getting down to being authentically who you are and what your desires are, and being honest with yourself. And sometimes it helps to have somebody get you there.
Absolutely.
Because, sometimes we can't see what we can't see. And that's what a coach is really good at doing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I do accept, this is all about being honest, not only with yourself, but with your partner or partners in any sort of relationship, isn't it? And
Yeah, it
that's the most
is.
ethical way of doing life.
Yeah, it is. It's really, if the way to really be successful at it is to really be out in the open, and people have a hard time doing it. They, it's vulnerable. Yeah, because you're actually expressing what you want, and um sometimes just we are trained, like how many years and centuries have we gone where men have these other relationships and their wives don't know about it. It's kind of run through society, and that it's not to be talked about, that you can't have those desires, that so you have to get the belief systems out of the way before you can really find out what you want. What do you
Mm.
want to believe? What works for you? You don't have to fit into everybody's box. You don't.
No, you don't. So, for the benefit of the audience, if there's anybody struggling with this, or they're actually looking into experimenting with this, some sort of non-traditional relationship, what's the best way they can get in touch with you, Gayle?
The best way is to go to my website, which is relationships with an S, evolving.com. So relationshipsevolving.com. And I have some information on there about me, about the different types of relationships. There's a no cost initial consultation that you can book. And I also have a freebie on my website. You can either click the freebie up at the top navigation, but it's on open relationships. So I do have like a whole PDF that does a rundown on open relationships, and then some videos. So if you like to do videos instead, it's like 3 short videos that you can watch and just really understand what an open relationship is. And then also maybe discover, is it for you? I call it my yay or nay videos. Yay or nay? So
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing your personal story as well. It takes a certain amount of courage and vulnerability to do that. So thank you for that, Gayle.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap this episode up?
My words of wisdom would be if this is something that you're just beginning to engage in, take it slow. Again, there's no rush to the finish line. I know sometimes we see somebody and we get really excited about them and we're like, oh, we don't want to miss the opportunity. Just breathe, breathe and take it slow because, you're dealing with somebody that you've been with for years, and you've loved them and appreciated them. And so, express your desires, be open, be authentic with each other, and then start choosing from there.
Thank you so much. That's been very insightful for me to hear. All your experiences, as well as I'm sure for the audience listening too. So thank you once again, Gayle. I really appreciate you being a great guest today.
All right. Thank you.
So it just leaves me to say, listeners, true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.